Marketing Your Private Practice is a podcast where you'll learn easy to implement tips and strategies to grow your business without spending all day online. I'm your host, Kathy Colaiacovo, and I teach practitioners the Thrive marketing method to create simple and streamlined plans by focusing on long-term strategies, not just social media. Discover ways to spend less time on your marketing, attract more clients, and build the financial freedom that comes with a thriving practice. One where you have time left in your day for the people and things that matter to you. Hey there, private practice heroes. Thanks for tuning into the podcast today. I'm your host, Kathy Colaiacovo, and today's lesson is all about what to do in week 3 for your MVP plan for marketing your practice, your minimum viable plan. And this week is where a lot of people finally breathe a sigh of relief because you're not creating content and writing. We're not making something new from scratch. You're simply going to be formatting and sending your newsletter. And that's it. You already did the hard work earlier and that content creation. In episode 168, we talked about creating your anchor content, which is that core article that's going to carry your message. And then in episode 169, we covered how to prep the content so it supports everything else that you're going to do. Episode 170, I walked you through how you can spend just 15 minutes a week networking online in a way that actually makes sense for private practice owners. And then today, we're pulling it together with putting your newsletter out there. So this time, the 1 hour for this week will look like spending about 45 minutes formatting and scheduling your newsletter, and then 15 minutes of live online networking using that NICE approach that I shared in episode 170. Remember, networking is connecting and engaging, NICE. Now, let's jump into what we're going to do in this week 3, which is how you're going to actually be able to do your newsletter in under 1 hour. And it is possible, and it's important. The newsletter is often one of the top marketing activities people let fall by the wayside, yet it's one of the biggest ones you should be doing because your newsletter matters more than you think. It's not about traffic. It's not about algorithms. It's not about SEO. Your newsletter is your relationship builder, and it is the one that you shouldn't be skipping if possible. But I know we all do that. I've been guilty of this myself lately too. But you have to remember, every person on your email list has already raised their hand and said, yes, I want to hear from you. That alone puts your email list of subscribers in a completely different category than your connections and likes from social media. And here's something I want all of you to remember to pay attention to. When your full content is inside your email, about 30% of your subscribers are going to read it. I don't want you to be sending a teaser and forcing people to click a read more link to finish the article online, because fewer people will actually do that. People are busy. They're scanning emails between clients and appointments in real life. So if you want them to actually consume your content, you need to make sure you're putting all of the content where they already are, which is right there in their inbox. And I'm going to share how you make this happen and the best tips that I have to help you get the most amount of people possible to read your content to. So let's walk through these 7 steps to formatting your newsletter for results. So at this point, we're in week 3. In week 1, we have created the content. We wrote that article and we created some of our social media. In week 2, we created the actual social media content and the images, and we did some networking. Now it's week 3. We're going to take that article that we wrote already, and we're going to format it for our newsletter to send as an email marketing tool. So there's 7 steps that I usually tell people and teach people in my Thrive Marketing Academy how to format your newsletter. So how to take that article you already wrote and format it to get the best results possible. The first thing is step 1 is you've got to lead with a strong subject line. The subject line really matters, but it doesn't matter in the way most people think. It is not your blog title. This is not an SEO headline we're looking at. Your subject line for an email marketing newsletter has one job: to get people to open the email and read it. You want to keep it simple. You want to make it clear. You want to spark curiosity or promise something that they're going to get by clicking and opening and reading it. The best way that you can create a subject line that will get more people to open the email is to think of questions that your ideal clients are already asking, of a common frustration that they might recognize instantly, or a benefit that feels really relevant to them right now. And that's all, of course, in relation to what the content is in the article. So whatever you wrote in that anchor content piece, you want to make sure your subject line speaks to what is in there, but it's something that's going to make people open it. And you don't want to give away what's in there. You want to invoke curiosity more than anything with this. Now, you don't want to do what they call clickbaiting, so you don't want to trick people with what you're doing, but you want to make sure that you have a very short, simple subject line that people will go, oh, and think about and want to click and read more. If you put in your subject line everything that you've got in the article, you're often going to get people prejudging, maybe I don't want to read about that right now. Oh, I'm not interested in it. So you've got to make sure that you're thinking about these questions or frustrations that they have and give them something in a way that helps them open it up. For some of my email marketing newsletters, some of the subject lines that I would use are things like one article a month in an hour a week. Yes, it's possible. Another one that I have is why passive income is an internet myth. Then I've got another one that says how to plan a year of marketing ideas fast and easy. Now, some of them give people an idea of what the article is about, but they're more intended to have people look at them, read them, and think, oh, do I want to know that? And then click to read and keep reading whatever's in the newsletter. That's the biggest tip that I have for you on the subject line is try to make sure that it is not something that sounds like it belongs on a blog title or that Google is looking for. An email subject line is absolutely written for the people that are reading the emails, and the intent is to get them to open it. Now, there's a bonus tip here too. There is a preview or a second line or a second preview line that most email systems offer now too. It's a second line that acts as kind of a support of the subject line. People can see it in their inbox when the email is not open. This is a spot where you can use this space very wisely, almost as a supporting headline to go with the subject line. And definitely keep this short and simple. I like to keep mine under 25 and 30 characters. So I mean really short. And all it does there is it's something that's intended to help make sure that it adds a little bit to the subject line so that it helps support that whole goal of getting people to click and read your email. And if you check out episode 161 that I've done on the podcast, I share a lot more details on subject lines and preview lines and what you can do with those. And I'll put a link to that in the show notes. Step 2 is the thing that is very different about blogs and email marketing newsletters. You want to include some sort of an intro or a personal intro. And this is where newsletters shine. Your subscribers already know who you are. They've downloaded something, they've booked something with you, they've followed your work long enough to land on your email marketing list. This is where you need to talk like a human. A short personal intro can do a few things to the people on your newsletter list. It warms them up before you do some of the teaching in the content. It reinforces the fact that there's actually a real person behind the email, and it helps build trust over time. Now, I don't mean oversharing, but I mean sharing enough that you're connecting with people. A few sentences is all you typically need here, and try to tie it naturally into the topic of the newsletter. I always like to think about a little story I can share, something that's been going on personally that will lead into the topic of the newsletter. And to be honest, a lot of times the ideas that I got for the article in the first place came from something in real life. So that makes it a lot easier to tie that intro in a very natural way. Step number 3 is when you want to format your content in the newsletter for online reading. And this part is non-negotiable. You do not want to have tons of text in here in giant paragraphs. You got to throw some of the grammar rules out the window and think of one idea per paragraph. Having white space, using short, clear sentences, using bold text or headlines to highlight key points, using bullet lists where it makes sense. You want to make the content skimmable because most people are reading it on their phones. If it looks really overwhelming, they're not going to read it. But you also want to make sure that you're putting in those headlines and bullets so that if somebody were to skim and just read all of those, they would get some of the idea of what you're trying to get across, so much so that maybe they stop and read and finish it off. And that's the big goal there. Step number 4 is what I alluded to at the very beginning here, which is put in the full content in your email. This is truly the biggest mistake I see practice owners make with their newsletters. They tease the content and try to send people to their blog to read the rest of the article. But here's the reality. Average open rates on newsletters are probably around 25 to 30%. Average click rates are 2 to 5%. And what that means is when somebody clicks a link that you put in a newsletter, so they go and read more information elsewhere. So even when people click the read more, you're actually losing readers. The reason that I say put in the full content is because when you put in that read more link, yes, you're going to get a higher click rate, but your click rate might only go up to 8%, maybe 10%. So if you think back to these statistics, 30% open the email. Click rates, if you put in a read more, you might change that to 8 or 10%. But that means only 8 or 10% had the opportunity to actually read all of the content you wanted to send them. Whereas if you had put the full content in the first place, the 30% that opened it could have read all the content. So doing that read more, a lot of people do it to get more traffic on their website, and they do it to try and get high click rates. But the whole point of that content that you created was for people to consume it. So don't make it harder for them. Put the entire article or the main content of the lesson right in the email. Your newsletter should really stand on its own. No one should need to click a link to get the value of the lesson you want to share. Yes, you want to have links in there, but if you said that you were going to give somebody 3 tips to stop dieting in the new year, you want to make sure that they can read those 3 tips in the email. You don't want to have them click and go to your website to read them because fewer people will actually read it if you do that read more link. So make sure, step number 4 here is put in the full content in the email. And if you're following the entire system here, you've created that main anchor content. It's not like you're rewriting the content here. You can just copy and paste that lesson that you had in the anchor content and put it in your email marketing system to go out as the newsletter. Step number 5 is to make sure you always include one clear call to action. Not 5, just one, not a whole menu of options. Your call to action really should be adding to the newsletter content and not unlocking the content. And what I mean is not having that read more to read the content. So a good example of this would be click here to book a consult if you want help doing this thing that we talked about in the article. Maybe it's to click and download a related resource or an added thing that you have to help them. Maybe it's to click and do a little more from what they learned already there. I've had people do that. We'll have a click in a newsletter to get these steps to do the meal planning that they talked about in the article. There's lots of things that you can do with those calls to action. And those calls to action should be leading to people doing more with you or booking a consult. Depending on your business, it might be book and buy, click here and sign up. So it really depends on what your purpose is, but you always want to have some sort of call to action in your email marketing newsletter. The key is clarity. Have one next step for people to take, and that's it. So make sure you include your CTAs in your newsletter. Step number 6 is we want to add images for visual variety. You don't want to add a ton, but they will help break up the text and support your message. So when people are skimming, some of those images are going to help them take in the content. I like to just put in an additional one. I have my logo usually at the top, and then I put maybe one more image in that's connected to the content. If I have a newsletter that has a client testimonial in it, I might have another image for that in there as well. So keep it simple, get your branded banner or logo at the top, and one more image to add that is supporting the content. And also make sure that the images look good on mobile and desktop, that they load quickly, and always include the alternative text for accessibility. That is a section that whenever you upload an image into your newsletter, there's a spot you can add that. It should describe the image so that if people don't open the image, or if they're someone who needs accessibility to understand what the image is about because they cannot see the image, it's going to help there as well. Images have a goal of supporting your message, not distracting from it. So remember that. And typically here, all I'm putting in this is one of the images I made that's going to be used on social media too. So I'm not making extra images here. We talked about that for the lesson for week 2. It's not about creating extra images to go in the newsletter. Just use one of the ones that you've already created and have in place from the system that you've set in place with your MVP plan. Step 7 is something that a lot of people forget too. Proof your newsletter, test your newsletter, and then you can schedule your newsletter. Always send yourself a test email and test the links and make sure they all click and make sure they open. Make sure you can read it on your phone. Look for awkward spacing or formatting issues. You just want to make sure that everything looks good. If you've already proofread what you put together for your anchor content, you're not going to have to proofread it again. Emails, though, often look different once they're formatted. So one of the things that I typically do, and I do this with my team and my clients, is we do the proofing not of the document, but of the actual newsletter through a test email. Most systems offer a preview, and you can double check in various options like mobile, desktop, and more. So you definitely want to look at that to ensure your newsletter looks best in someone's inbox. And this is your opportunity to clean it up if it doesn't. But I also like to make sure I send an actual test email so that I can see what it looks like specifically on my desktop and on my phone. And then once it looks good, you're ready to schedule it and move on. And all of that should take you about 45 minutes because, again, we're not writing the content from the beginning here. We're just adding some extra pieces to it. The only new content you're creating here is the subject line and the little intro at the very beginning. And that's it. We're not creating anything new other than that. Now, I do have an extra pro tip for you here. Resending the email and newsletter to unopens. So this means resending your newsletter to people who didn't open it in the first place. When you resend your newsletter to people who didn't open it in the first initial send of the email, it can help increase your reach and make sure that more people open it. But there are some things that you need to understand about it for doing this. Number 1, never reuse the same subject line. So most email marketing systems have a tool where you can basically click a button and say, resend this email to unopens. It's fast, it's easy, but always change the subject line. Never let it go out as resending. I've seen that so many times recently because some of the email systems out there are automatically putting that in the subject line to change the subject line. And it says right at the beginning, resending. I definitely don't like to do that. I actually tell people, and I teach students in my program, to change the actual subject line. When we use my article template, there's a section in it for the newsletter that says subject line and preview line, and then resend subject line and resend preview line. We change both of those when we do the resend. We do that so that the subject line is different and that it doesn't put that email in the same spot as the previous email, because some email systems, Google is one of them, it will sort by conversation view. So if the subject line is the same, it keeps putting it into the same little spot. And now all of a sudden you've got two as part of that email thread. So if you don't change the subject line at all, it's going to just go in there and it will look like you've got two of the same things. I usually tell people do it 5 or 7 days later, resend it if people didn't open it, which is great. You'll up the open rates for sure because more people are going to open it now because maybe they see it today on Tuesday when it came in on Thursday originally, they didn't notice it. So that's a good way to increase your open rates and get more people reading the content and seeing the content, but you need to be aware of something. Apple Mail privacy settings have changed in the past couple of years. So you will have people that actually opened it, but it looks like they didn't open it when they actually did. So this means some people will see the second email, will notice it, will pay attention to the fact that it was actually the same email that they got a few days ago, and they might complain. So if they do, tag them in your system, something like DNS, do not send reopens. And then when you're doing the resend to the unopens, you can make sure that those people don't get a copy. If you get a lot of complaints, though, just stop the resending because it's not worth it at that point. But if you have a list of 500 and maybe one person says something every other time, it's not worth stopping it because it is a really good way to get more people to open your newsletters. So bonus tip there is resend to the people who did not open the email, but do it in a smart way. Now, that takes us to the end of prepping the newsletter. We've got it done, formatted, scheduled, and ready to go. That should be 45 minutes of your 1 hour. Now you have your final 15 minutes of that hour, and this is where we're going to spend some more time networking online. So once you've scheduled your newsletter, you move into the last 15 minutes of your hour, and you start connecting and engaging online. So follow that nice system that I taught you in episode 170. Spending a few minutes online, connecting, engaging, commenting on people's posts, replying to stories, maybe posting a persona content or two, joining in some conversations, doing that simple networking that supports everything else you're doing and keeps your name visible and helps you building more relationships through social media. And that will wrap up week 3 of the MVP plan for marketing your practice or your business. Your hour is complete. Your action steps from today's lesson are to follow the plan. And for this week 3, this is where you're going to turn your anchor content into a newsletter, schedule it, and make that email newsletter a real repeatable part of your MVP plan for marketing. You want to format it so it's easy to read, has a little bit of your personality and some persona stuff added into it to engage with people a little more and give them the full content in the email. So give them that whole lesson in there and then schedule it to send and go out on whatever date that you have planned. And then simply spend 15 minutes doing some of your connecting and engaging online. And that hour for this week is complete. Next time, we'll move into week 4, where we're going to format the anchor content as a blog post on your website and schedule that to go out online, along with scheduling your social media posts. Make sure that you check out the next episode. And that's your lesson for today, folks. That is your week 3 hour for your MVP plan for marketing your practice or your business. It's a system that really is intended to help you make your marketing easier and get it done and do it in a lot less time than you did before. So this is Kathy Colaiacovo signing off, saying thanks for tuning in. Remember, to thrive in practice or business means booking more consults and clients. You can do this by nurturing your email list. Follow this system to get your newsletter out there consistently. That's going to support you thriving in practice. I'll see you next time. You can find all of our show notes and resources mentioned at marketingyourprivatepractice.com. Be sure to connect with me on Instagram at pepperitmarketing and say hi. I'd love to hear any feedback you have, and make sure to rate and review the podcast and hit subscribe on your favorite player so you don't miss any future episodes.